Facts about America's forgotten invasion of Mexico. The Irish helped Mexico? During the middle of the Mexican-American War, a band of Irish-American immigrants defected from the American side and joined their enemies south of the border. The group of Irish-born men was known as St. Patrick's Battalion, and they had been one of the U.S.'s most formidable fighting forces before deserting and joining up with Mexico. The 200 men who made up the fighting force were Catholics, as were many of their brethren back home in Ireland. But once they'd gotten to the United States, they had quickly grown tired of anti-Catholic prejudice from the predominantly Protestant population. So when they saw they had an opportunity to fight for another group of Catholics, that is, the Mexican force, they cast their lot with their religious peers. The leader of St. Patrick's Battalion was a man named John Riley. He led the defectors to Santa Anna's Mexican army. There, they became the formerly exiled general's esteemed artillery force. And for a while, they were very successful at what they did. The Irish defectors acquitted themselves well at the battles of Buena Vista and Cerro Gordo. But in August 1847 fight at Churubusco led to virtually all of the unit being killed or captured. The ones who were taken into custody by the Americans were later court-martialed by the U.S. Army, with more than 4 dozen executed and the rest whipped and branded with a D4 deserter. It wasn't all bad for the Irish soldiers, though. Mexican legends live on. Just like their unlikely Irish allies, other Mexican forces from the war are still honored in the modern age. Most notable among these was a group of men and young boys who fought for their country against the invading Americans at the Battle of Chapultepec. It was in that battle, just outside Mexico City in September of 1847, where American forces were blocked from invading the capital. Standing in their way was Chapultepec Castle, a historic and imposing fortress that doubled as Mexico's version of West Point. General Scott, yes, the same general who had just marched his men hundreds of miles inland from their amphibious landing in Veracruz, ordered his troops to storm the castle. He was hoping they would be able to climb up the impenetrable building's stone facade with ladders they'd carried inland with them. The Americans had numbers there like they did in nearly every battle of the war. So when they began charging and climbing, most of the Mexicans within the castle withdrew to fight another day. But not 6 teenage boys who had been students of the military academy. These 6 young cadets stayed at their posts and valiantly fought against the Americans until the very end of their young lives. According to Mexican military lore, when it was all coming down to the end for these outnumbered souls, one of the young cadets supposedly draped the Mexican flag around his body and jumped to his death off the top of the castle wall. Treason or treaty? While the war may have started because of Polk's trickery near the Rio Grande, it ended in an even more conniving fashion. By the middle of 1847, the war was inching toward a conclusion. And it seemed as though the United States had the upper hand. They were, after all, the more powerful and better equipped army. But as the months went on, the finish line simply wouldn't pop up. So, in late 1847, Polk sent a U.S. State Department assistant named Nicholas P. Trist to Mexico City. His job was to secure a peace treaty with Santa Anna and the rest of the Mexican leaders. At first, negotiations proved very, very slow. By late November of that year, with no apparent progress having been made, Polk ordered Trist to return home at once. Trist didn't follow the order, though. And while he didn't commit outright treason, his direct disinclination to do as his president demanded was a jaw-dropping move for then or now. First, upon disobeying Polk's order, Trist powered through a 65-page letter back to Washington. In it, he laid out all the reasons why he believed he was on the verge of brokering a full peace accord. Then, he kept negotiating with the Mexicans, who were none the wiser to Trist's daring move. Back in the White House, Polk literally seethed at the affront. He publicly called Trist destitute of principle and vowed to fire him upon his return home to America. He moved immediately to remove Trist's position from the State Department and his offices from the U.S. Army headquarters. That worked stateside, but Polk couldn't stop the negotiations in Mexico City. Trist carried on south of the border, and on February 2, 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was finalized. Pope reluctantly accepted the deal. He, too, wanted the war to be over, but he never forgot how Trist had so openly disobeyed him. And when the treaty broker returned to Washington weeks later, he was immediately fired. That's all for today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. In highly controlled settings, making them excellent subjects for experiments. Being closely related to humans means they could be a valuable way to study human diseases and produce life-saving cures more quickly. Many people object to raising animals for the sole purpose of experimentation, especially more cognizant ones like monkeys. That's all for today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.